Elon Musk has just exposed what many are calling the scandal of the century. He's ripped off the cloak of deceit of one of Britain's most disgusting, heinous scandals in their entire history. It's being called the grooming gang or rape gang scandal, and it's rocking the UK government like never before. Now, you need to be forewarned here. What you're about to hear is not going to be pleasant, but it has been meticulously documented, so much so that what I'm about to share with you appears to have happened beyond a shadow of a doubt, unfortunately. I want to give a big shout out to the British scholar Matthew Goodwin, who's done a wonderful job on his Substack compiling all of the evidence, data, and events surrounding the scandal, a scandal that threatens to actually end not just the current UK government, but ideological wokeness itself. Now, before we dive in, I do want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, and that's Liver Health Formula. If you're one of the 100 million Americans struggling with all the weight gain and loss of energy that comes with a fatty liver, you gotta try Liver Health Formula. It's an all-natural supplement. It contains 12 clinically proven botanicals. It helps recharge and protect your liver. It's manufactured right here in the USA and approved by independent American doctors. And if you click on that link below right now, you could try Liver Health Formula and receive a free bottle of blood sugar formula when you order today. So don't let a fatty liver keep you sluggish and inactive. Click on that link below or go to getliverhealth.com/Turley and claim your free bonus gift. That's getliverhealth.com/Turley. Simply put, over the last 30 years, there has been an organized, methodical, industrial scale rape and sexual harassment of young, white, British girls and children by predominantly Pakistani Muslim gangs. Bottom line. The numbers here are shocking. We're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of children being systematically raped and abused by organized gangs of men, all the while the people in power, the British government, British authorities, the very people charged with protecting these children, deliberately turned a blind eye and, in point of fact, have gone so far as to try to cover it up. Yes, this is turning out to be one of the single most horrific moments in the UK's history in terms of how their government deliberately and intentionally failed their citizens. The story originally broke back in 2011. Journalist Andrew Norfolk reported on girls as young as 12 having abortions as a result of abuse, while one girl, aged 13, appeared to have been raped more than 50 times. He noted that in 17 trials held from 1997 to his time of that report, 2011, across 13 towns, 50 of the 56 offenders were Pakistani Muslim. And then another report came out in 2014, this by the British professor Alexis Jay, and it found that in a single northern town in England, at least 1,400 children were sexually exploited. 1,400 children in a single town. Again, the report found that the vast majority of the perpetrators were Pakistani Muslim. In another report, this involved the town of Telford, near Birmingham, a town of 140,000 residents. Some 1,000 young girls were systematically raped and sexually abused by gangs of men over a number of years. And that number of 1,000 is most likely, according to the report, tame as compared to what the actual number is. The perpetrators were, again, mostly Pakistani men. The victims were overwhelmingly poor, white, and English, and they were as young as 11 and 12 years old. A recent academic paper examined 73 trials covering 44 towns and 498 accused. That report found that 83% of the people prosecuted for group localized child sexual exploitation were Muslim. According to the conclusion of another report, this epidemic of child rape on a mass industrial scale simply has no other comparison, even remotely, in 21st century Britain. According to one member of parliament, as many as 1 million British children could have been affected by the rape gangs over the last 30 years. 1 million. Now, as horrifying as this is, these rape gang scandals throw into relief two wider, more fundamental issues that are currently gripping the UK, as well, I should say, as the United States and the entirety of the Western world at large. It foregrounds first and foremost the policy of big business and big government forming an alliance to import cheap migrant workers from abroad so as to maximize profit margins for the ultra-wealthy and guarantee votes for the political class. And secondly, it foregrounds the complete implausibility of the multiculturalism myth that's being used to justify that addiction to importing cheap migrant workers. So the rape gang scandals foreground the wider issues of policy and ideology, a political policy of importing foreign labor, and a political ideology of multiculturalism that claims to morally justify that policy. So what's so important to get here is that there are several studies that show that multicultural societies dedicated to mass migration, actually undermine the key component to a flourishing society, and that's social trust. So these are studies that have found that multiculturalism or just mass migration fail as both policy and ideology, totally irregardless of a scandal like this one that's broken out. So what we have to understand is that this policy and this ideology are already on very tenuous, shaky grounds. What I'm getting at there is studies are showing that societies that are basically unicultural, that is united by a single dominant culture, say like Japan, tend to foster high degrees of social trust. All the while societies that are basically multicultural, characterized by the issues we've been discussing, tend to exemplify rather low levels of social trust. So a very interesting study came out of Sweden that surveyed interpersonal trust among the Swedish population between the years 2014 and 2017. That is before and after the refugee crisis of 2015, when Sweden received per capita the most amount of refugees than any other country in Europe. And the study found that the confidence and faith that Swedes had in their neighbors, which is a key gauge of social trust, decreased dramatically in 20 of 33 municipalities. That's 60% of their municipalities. And the study found a very clear converse relationship in that the more the refugees in a particular municipality, the lower the social trust. So this addiction by our elites to importing cheap labor from abroad only ends up weakening the social cohesion of our society across the board, period, regardless of scandals. We don't need mass gang rapes to see how multicultural policies actually end up significantly undermining social trust. That said, the epidemic of mass gang rapes by primarily Pakistani Muslim men, according to these reports, against young white British girls turns out to be a heinously explicit example of precisely why mass migration policies in point of fact lead to so much social distrust. So this is simply another way of saying that mass migration has a built-in futility. The policy necessarily, by its nature, ends up undermining itself by eroding the very prerequisite for a functioning social order, which is social trust. So the political policy issue is exposed as being inherently futile and self-defeating. But when all is said and done, it's the multicultural ideology that is turning out to be the single most pernicious, nefarious, and heinous aspect of all. Precisely because this is where all the attempts at covering up this horror ultimately lie. What we have to understand is that this mass gang rape scandal in the UK is more than anything else exposing the oppressor-oppressed binary of woke multiculturalists to be an outright fraud. Woke progressives are fanatically devoted to the notion that all minorities are sacred and virtuous, all the while the white majority in the West are oppressors and victimizers. This oppressor-oppressed binary, which is parroted and amplified by the legacy media, which we'll hear in a moment, justifies all kinds of left-wing activism that seeks to overturn our supposedly systemically racist societies. What this mass gang rape scandal exposes is just what a pathological lie that woke binary actually is. As it turns out, humans never fail to disappoint, minority or majority. Minority cultures can be just as horrific and oppressive and victimizing as any white majority supposedly is, if not worse. And so, how does a political class, an elite liberal aristocracy among all political parties in Britain, keep in mind, how did they respond to all of that? How did they respond to their precious ideology being exposed as a lie? Well, as policy analyst Laura Brown has meticulously documented, authorities didn't just ignore the victims of these rapes. In some cases, authorities blamed the victims. You can't make this stuff up. She gives one example of how a 13-year-old victim was blamed by authorities for, quote, placing herself at risk of sexual exploitation and danger. Another indictment involved a 12-year-old girl found drunk in a derelict house with several sexual predators. She was arrested for being drunk and disorderly, while none of the groomers were arrested. We could go on and on and on. School teachers deliberately turning blind eyes to children exemplifying evidence of sexual abuse. And then, of course, the unison chorus of woke-splainers accusing anyone and everyone who raised so much as a whit of concern about all of this as nothing more than racist Islamophobes, stoked by Elon Musk's own echo chamber. I kid you not. Check this out.
The real risk you have in the US isn't multiculturalism. It's a multi-billionaire running the biggest social media planet, one of the biggest in the world, which has turned into an echo chamber of your ridiculous ideology. And the fact that you're telling us all and telling the British public, who we're proudly multicultural, as someone that was brought up in multicultural working class Birmingham, I can tell you for sure that there's not you won't find a Muslim there who's read the Quran and went, oh, you know what, it didn't rule out sexual violence, so I might just crack on with that. I don't know what planet you're living on or what you're smoking, but I'd suggest that you do a course in religious studies before you start chatting.
Well, thank you for the ad hominem attacks. I'm sure that means you have a really strong argument, but I think the young working class girls who probably grew up in the same areas that you did would beg to differ.
Now, unfortunately for smug, witless, mindless, liberal shitheads like that fellow, the days of the legacy media covering up all of this are over. That multi-billionaire running the biggest social media platform on the planet is, in point of fact, blowing the roof off this scandal, doing the work that you and the legacy media should be doing. That is, had you any semblance of professional decency or personal dignity, which you obviously do not. This is turning out to be nothing less than the scandal of the century. And we can once again thank Elon Musk and the X platform for exposing it. And finally, in the end, we will hope, bring all this woke nonsense to the bitter end it so justifiably deserves.